Hello and welcome to the Championship Talk podcast. I'm your host Paul O'Toole, and not joined with me again today is my co-host Thomas Falco. Bless him, small humans take a lot of time, especially new ones to the world. So congratulations Thomas and Kelly on the birth of your new baby. So I'm going to start with, I think it's the best place to start with COVID because it's the biggest topic so far this year. It's probably the thing we've all talked about more, and it's the restrictions that we're having placed on us, relaxing month by month. However, as we start to look towards normality, the EFL, the EFL have said that COVID passports may be the only way that fans can return to the stadium from next season with some sort of regularity. And I think the context behind that is obviously there's going to be new variants continually to come out. We potentially are in a situation where we'll need new jabs every year, etc, etc, etc. Obviously what the EFL want to do is to, and probably what most of society wants to do, is have a proper way forward where the impact of COVID is minimised as much as possible so that normality that we were used to having can come back. The financial impact of COVID has had on the EFL, it's estimated that £250 million from the 72 EFL clubs, 250 million is the financial hit that has been caused with a season with no fans. And when you look at the EFL clubs, 72, you divide 250 million by 72, that isn't a great deal of money. Obviously skewed more towards the Championship, so bigger chunk of that is obviously Championship lost revenue, bigger gates receipts, etc. Then obviously scaled back to League One, and then League Two. Obviously, what the EFL would want is some sort of COVID passport system, whether it be an e-passport or something that confirms that yes, you can come into the stadium, no issue, perhaps relaxing of social distancing, etc. Allows more and more fans in the stadium, and we eventually get back to some sort of normality. I think they've warned of the potential impact if we move into another season of not having fans in the stadium, and the long-term effect if there's restrictions for the entirety of next season. So if gates are limited to sort of half their capacity, etc. Light on the horizon though, 8,000 tickets, or 8,000 fans are going to be in the stadium for the EFL Carabao Cup final, which I think is amazing, and that is probably going to be the most watched Carabao Cup final for a number of years. Probably because it's got fans in the stadium. It'll be an oddity. It'll be something that we're not used to, certainly recently. And I think that'll be a good thing. I think that'll be a good thing for the Carabao Cup because I think people will finally be interested in it. Because I think people are finally going to watch that cup because it's going to have something that probably the Premier League game that went on 10 minutes before is not going to have, and that's fans in stadium and an atmosphere. Obviously, 8,000 people in Wembley, which holds 80 to 90,000, is a small percentage. And what we wouldn't want is, say, Wickham only being allowed 10% of their gate in, which would only be 1,000 fans. So it's something that's being looked at, and obviously we'll keep you updated. Personally, what I think, there are pros and cons of COVID passports. There are people that look at data protection, and people look at freedom of movement, civil liberties, all that jazz. I would argue a counter to that, how much civil liberties have we had in the last year all being locked up at home? So would having an app on your phone really be the end of the world short term? Long term, obviously there are bigger impacts. So, but in terms of the EFL, 250 million, that's if that happens next season, that's a lot of clubs not being around, and I think that's the long that pretty much is the long and the short of it. Next thing is something that flew under the radar that I didn't even know was actually happening. I know certainly myself and Thomas hadn't spoken about it. Is the EFL have suggested and are looking at a squad limit of 25 players for the Championship clubs and 20 players for Leagues 1 and 2. and they're looking to restrict the number of players on the books as a way of limiting the size of some of the squads. I would imagine this is going to be linked to, and again, this is me thinking out loud, I would imagine this is going to be linked to the salary cap they tried to introduce. Limit the number of players, limit the expenditure on player salary. The PFA have argued and have said that they will take legal action because they don't feel that League 1 and 2 should be penalised and only having a 20-man squad as opposed to a 25-man squad. And their argument is a 20-man squad perhaps are not going to be able to deal with the demands of a 46-game season, perhaps a Johnson's Paint Trophy run or whatever that competition is called now. Maybe you go a couple of rounds into the EFL Cup, a couple of rounds into the FA Cup. You're then in a situation where you're onto a 55, 60-game season potentially with a 20-man squad. And I to be honest, I'm inclined to agree with them. I think a squad of 25 players is probably about right. I think maybe you could probably 26, 27 probably be more effective over the course of a season. Obviously, we've got the January transfer window, so you can fill gaps in there and etc. I think for Leagues 1 and 2, 20 registering only 20 players would be very restrictive. And I actually agree with the PFA. I think that if you're going to ask that same group of 20 players, all it takes is you just look at some of the COVID situations where half a squad is self-isolating. We still will be in that world from next season. So that could be quite interesting to see how that develops. Obviously, the PFA are challenging that and potentially taking legal action against the EFL as well. So we shall watch. We shall watch this space to see what happens. Personally, I think it should be the same for all the clubs. I think I can't understand why you wouldn't. To be fair, I can't understand why you wouldn't have it the same for every club. That just doesn't make sense, Yes, smaller clubs have got less budget, but the players in theory will cost less. So, yeah, I'm sure something can work out there. Next thing I want to talk about, I'm getting sick and tired of talking about this, and it's racial abuse on social media. However, I kind of want to talk about the stance Swansea are taking. They're boycotting social media for an entire week. And having seen quite prominent influencers come off of social media completely, Thierry Henry being one of them, he's quit social media. I know that there's been other high-profile sports people that have stopped using social media. Now, I was never a fan of being hounded out. However, what I am a big fan of is large companies, influencers, taking a complete removal from the space. If every single Premier League club and every single Championship club and everywhere through the football pyramid, if the FA, UEFA, if they remove themselves from social media and if they remove their content from social media, the social media platforms would have to act. And if they're not prepared to do some sort of validation system, they would have to come up with a very quick alternative, because I think if you remove the clip hits, the goal highlights, the watch this flick from Neymar, if you remove that from Twitter or you remove that type of influence from Instagram, they lose a lot of their appeal, because what will happen is people like myself, people like Thomas, probably wouldn't check it as often, and that then means ad revenue is not going to be, ads are not going to be rammed down our throat. Ad revenue is ultimately hit, and what I talk about on this podcast all the time is what gets to the root and affects change is companies will be influenced by finance. The reason I said that I was skeptical as to whether Facebook, Instagram, Twitter would implement some sort of validation process is because it would cost money, it would lose subscribers, which ultimately hits the bottom line. If some of these big influencers remove themselves from that social media space, and en masse, not as an individual being hounded out, that would have a massive impact, and it would force Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to put some sort of validation process in on account registration, because I think that's all it needs to function. Obviously, they're valued on their reach and appeal, so they can advertise and go to Twitter and Facebook and say, I want to reach 1 million people or 10 million people, and Facebook can go, yep, we've got hundreds of millions of subscribers. Absolutely, we can help you reach your demographic. If suddenly their user count has halved, or if they had to get every current user to validate, so suddenly they start from zero users of their platform, if only half of those users ever bother to do the validation process, it's going to hit their bottom line. Do I think the root of the problem is social media? No. I think the root of the problem is society and society's exception of anonymous abuse. However, do I think that the social media companies have got an ability to really affect change? Yes. Do I think that companies and big influencers, football clubs, the FA, UEFA, Premier League, do I think they've got the ability to affect change? Absolutely. Because if they remove their content from these spaces, these people are going to be yelling into the void. And I think that would be a good thing. And I think that would affect change. Generally do. Be interesting to see what Falco's view on this would be, because I think he would find that I think he would probably agree with me, which doesn't happen often. The last thing I want to talk about is Derby County have finally been sold. Mel Morris has finally managed to sell Derby County. It feels like he's been wandering the streets, sort of yelling "club for sale," because this seems to have gone on for a while, and protracted as it was. Mel Morris took over Derby in 2015, I believe, and he's put in around £200 million of his own money to help the team win promotion to Premier League. That's not happened. Obviously, the club were under scrutiny around the sale of the stadium and the kind of the technicalities of that. I think it's finally good that it's been able to move on, and I think that obviously when the sale has, or Derby's been, the sale process has been a long, protracted sales process. Anyone that's selling any kind of house or property at the minute knows how difficult that is. It's been sold to No Limit Sports, which is owned by Spanish businessman Eric Alonso. He previously had a short period as advisor with Championship club Sheffield Wednesday. Alonso said in a statement, "We are privileged to take ownership of one of the founding members of the Football League and build a fresh future for the fans, staff, players at Derby County." So yeah, so really good news that Derby are moving in the right direction. And by the looks of the results, it will be still in the Championship. So that's it from me. Hopefully you've enjoyed me ramble on for sort of 12 minutes. Next week's podcast may be with Thomas. It may not though, but we obviously all understand if it's going to be a couple of weeks before he's back. So thank you all for watching. As always, if you like the news part of our podcast, please do leave us a like. Hit us with any comments if you think there's any news I've missed, anything you think that's big that I've missed, anything you would want me and Thomas to discuss in the future. Absolutely. Check out our main podcast on any kind of podcast subscription service, where I'm going to ramble on for over the Easter period's fixtures. Some fantastic goals, some amazing goalkeeping errors, which I'm going to be uncontested about moaning about. So that's goodbye from me, and I shall speak to you all next week. Goodbye, everyone.